There is a moment in every conversation when a person tells you who they are. Not with a confession, not with some dramatic sentence. Usually, it happens in something small. The way they answer a simple question, the detail they avoid, the speed at which they interrupt, the silence they use when they are uncomfortable, the kind of thing they laugh at, the kind of thing they immediately defend. Most people miss it because they are too busy preparing what they want to say next. They listen to respond. But the person who learns to really observe begins to notice something different. Every human being has a pattern, not a label, not a box, not some shallow personality trick, a pattern, a way they protect themselves, a way they seek control, a way they ask for safety, respect, approval, or certainty without saying it directly. And once you understand that pattern, communication changes because you stop forcing people to receive your words in your language. You learn how to speak in theirs. And that is where real influence begins, not manipulation, understanding. To read someone well, you have to stop asking, what kind of person is this? That question is too flat. A better question is, what is this person trying to protect right now? Because underneath almost every communication style, there is a quiet form of self-protection. Some people protect themselves with control. They move fast. They ask direct questions. They want the point. They do not have much patience for long explanations because to them, uncertainty feels like wasted time. If they sound sharp, it is not always because they are cruel. Sometimes it is because they feel safest when things are clear, decided, and moving forward. Other people protect themselves with connection. They speak with energy. They tell stories. They make jokes. They look for emotional signals in the room. They are not just exchanging information. They are checking whether the space is warm, open, alive. When they seem distracted, it may not be because they do not care. It may be because cold, mechanical communication makes them feel invisible. Some people protect themselves with stability. They avoid unnecessary conflict. They soften their opinions. They say, "It's fine," even when it is not completely fine. They do not always reveal resistance immediately because they are scanning for tension. Their nervous system is not asking, "How do I win this?" It is asking, "Is this going to disturb the peace I am trying so hard to hold together?" And some people protect themselves with certainty. They ask for details. They notice gaps. They want proof, structure, sequence, context. They may seem slow or overly cautious to someone who wants fast action, but inside, they are trying to reduce risk. To them, vague confidence feels dangerous. Precision feels respectful. This is where communication begins to make sense. People are not just talking. They are revealing the condition under which they feel safe enough to listen. That is why the same sentence can land completely differently depending on who receives it. Tell one person, "We need to decide today," and they feel relieved. Finally, movement. Tell another person the same sentence and they feel pressured, too sudden, too much. Tell someone, "Let's just explore ideas," and one person lights up. Another person starts wondering who is responsible, what the deadline is, and whether this meeting has any point at all. This is why communication fails, even when the words are technically clear. The words are clear, but the nervous system receiving them is not open. A person who needs control does not relax when you bury the point under 10 minutes of context. A person who needs connection does not open up when you speak like you are reading from a legal document. A person who needs stability does not feel safe when you bulldoze through concerns in the name of efficiency. A person who needs certainty does not trust you when you say, "Don't worry, it'll work out," without showing how. And this is not about judging them. It is about noticing the door they actually enter through. Some people enter through results. Some enter through warmth. Some enter through calm. Some enter through logic. If you try to bring everyone through the same door, you will spend your life wondering why some people feel easy and others feel impossible. But they are not impossible. They are different. The mistake is assuming that because your way of speaking feels natural to you, it must feel natural to everyone else. It does not. Your natural style may feel like pressure to one person, chaos to another, coldness to another, or vagueness to another. This is a humbling thing to understand, because it means being a good communicator is not just about being honest. It is not just about being intelligent. It is not just about having something valuable to say. It is about becoming aware of how your presence lands inside another human being. You may be direct, but they may experience you as harsh. You may be enthusiastic, but they may experience you as scattered. You may be peaceful, but they may experience you as passive. You may be precise, but they may experience you as critical. And none of that means you are wrong. It means communication is not measured by what you intended to send. It is measured by what the other person was able to receive. That small difference changes everything. Because once you stop asking, "Why don't they understand me?" and start asking, "What conditions help this person feel understood?" you begin to listen differently. You notice whether someone is asking for the bottom line or asking for reassurance. You notice whether their resistance is disagreement, fear, confusion, or simply the need for more time. You stop treating every silence as rejection. You stop treating every question as criticism. You stop treating every strong opinion as arrogance. You start seeing the need underneath the behavior. And when you can see the need, you can choose your words with far more precision, not to control people, not to perform, but to meet them at the level where they can actually hear you. This is the first real shift. Reading people is not about guessing their secrets. It is about recognizing what they need in order to feel safe enough to be honest. A strange thing happens when communication goes wrong. We rarely say, "Maybe I translated this person incorrectly." We say, "They are being difficult." That is the first mistake. We take a behavior, attach a motive to it, and then start reacting to the motive we invented. Someone asks too many questions and we decide they do not trust us. Someone speaks too directly and we decide they do not respect us. Someone avoids giving a firm answer and we decide they are weak. Someone talks with too much enthusiasm and we decide they are not serious. And from that moment on, we are no longer responding to the person in front of us. We are responding to the story we created about them. This is where many conversations begin to collapse, not because the issue is impossible, but because both people are now defending themselves against an interpretation. You have probably felt this before. You say something with one intention, and someone receives it as something completely different. You were trying to be efficient, and they felt dismissed. You were trying to be careful, and they felt slowed down. You were trying to be supportive, and they felt managed. You were trying to be honest, and they felt attacked. And then, suddenly, the conversation is not about the original subject anymore. It becomes about tone. It becomes about attitude. It becomes about what you really meant. This is exhausting, especially when you already carry enough invisible weight in your day. There are bills to think about, people depending on you, work that does not wait, messages unanswered, appointments to remember, quiet pressure sitting in the background even when you are trying to have a normal conversation. So when someone misunderstands you, it does not feel small. It touches something deeper. It feels like one more place where you have to prove yourself. And because you are tired, you do what the human mind often does under pressure. You simplify. You reduce the other person to a type. He's arrogant. She's dramatic. He's too sensitive. She's impossible to please. But those labels may only be the surface translation of a deeper need. The direct person may not be trying to dominate. They may be trying to reduce uncertainty. The expressive person may not be trying to waste time. They may be trying to create energy before moving into substance. The cautious person may not be trying to block progress. They may be trying to prevent a mistake that everyone else is moving too quickly to see. The calm person may not be avoiding reality. They may be trying to keep the room from becoming emotionally unsafe. When you miss that, you respond to the wrong thing. You argue with their tone instead of understanding their need. You fight their style instead of reading their signal. And this is why smart people still have bad conversations. Intelligence does not automatically make you perceptive. You can be educated and still misread someone's fear as disrespect. You can be successful and still mistake someone's silence for agreement. You can be articulate and still make people feel unseen. Because perception requires a different kind of attention, not just attention to what is said, attention to what the person is protecting while they say it. There is a reason people reveal themselves most clearly when they feel some kind of pressure, a deadline, a disagreement, a change in plans, a question they were not expecting, a moment when they do not feel in control. When life is smooth, people can present a polished version of themselves, but under friction, their default pattern comes out. One person pushes harder. One person talks more. One person withdraws. One person starts analyzing every detail. This does not make them bad. It makes them readable. Pressure reveals the route a person takes back to safety. That is why you should pay close attention not only to what people prefer, but to what they do when something becomes uncomfortable. Do they try to take charge? Do they try to charm the room? Do they try to reduce tension? Do they try to gather more information? These responses are not random. They are clues. And once you learn to notice them, conversations stop feeling so mysterious. You begin to see that many people are not arguing against you. They are arguing for the condition they need in order to function. One person is arguing for clarity. Another is arguing for connection. Another is arguing for peace. Another is arguing for accuracy. If you do not recognize the difference, every style that is not yours will feel like a problem. But when you do recognize it, something changes inside you. You become less reactive. You do not take everything so personally. You can pause before signing a motive. You can hear the sentence beneath the sentence. A person may say, "I don't like this plan," but underneath that, they may be saying, "I do not feel prepared." Someone may say, "Let's just decide," but underneath that, they may be saying, "I cannot relax while this is unresolved." Someone may say, "Can we talk about this later?" But underneath that, they may be saying, "I need time before I can respond honestly." Someone may say, "This could be fun," but underneath that, they may be saying, "I need to feel emotionally engaged before I commit." The words are the surface. The need is the message. And if you can hear the need, you can respond in a way that almost feels surprising to the other person, because few people are used to being understood at that level. They are used to being corrected, managed, interrupted, judged, classified too quickly. But when someone feels accurately read without feeling exposed, they soften. Not always immediately, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for the conversation to become real. And that is the skill we are building here, not the ability to impress people with clever words, the ability to slow down your interpretation long enough to see what is actually happening. Because once you stop reacting to the story in your head, you can finally respond to the person in front of you.
The cost of misreading people is rarely paid in one dramatic moment. It is paid quietly, little tension after a meeting, shorter reply than usual. Spouse who stops explaining because explaining has started to feel useless. A colleague who still does the work but no longer brings you their best thinking. Friend who says, "No, it's okay," and somehow you know it is not okay, but neither of you has the energy to open the door again. This is how distance is built. Not always through betrayal, often through repeated misunderstanding. Every time a person feels misread, something small closes. They may still be polite. They may still answer. They may still show up. But a private calculation begins. Is it worth saying what I really mean? Will this person understand me, or will they turn it into something else? Do I have the strength to be misunderstood again today? And when the answer becomes no, communication does not disappear. It becomes thinner, more functional, more careful, more edited. The conversation continues, but the honesty leaves the room. This is why learning to read people matters more than sounding impressive. A person can have a strong vocabulary, a confident tone, even good intentions, and still slowly train others not to be honest with them. Not because they are cruel, because they do not notice what their presence creates. Some people create pressure without meaning to. They walk into a room with urgency in their face, and everyone starts trimming their thoughts down to what sounds efficient, Useful concerns are left unsaid because no one wants to seem slow. Some people create noise without meaning to. They bring so much energy, so many ideas, so many emotional turns, that quieter people stop trying to enter the conversation. Not because they have nothing to say, but because there is no clean space to place it. Some people create fog without meaning to. They avoid clear positions in order to keep things peaceful, but the people around them begin to feel uncertain. No one knows where they stand. Decisions become soft, delayed, half-made. Some people create tension through precision. They correct small details so quickly that others begin to protect themselves from speaking freely. Eventually, people bring them polished answers, not honest drafts.
None of these styles are wrong by themselves.
Each one has value. Speed can save time. Energy can open people up. Calm can prevent unnecessary damage. Precision can protect the quality of the outcome. But every strength has a shadow when it is used without awareness. The direct person may call it efficiency, while others experience it as force. The expressive person may call it passion, while others experience it as instability. The peaceful person may call it patience, while others experience it as avoidance. The analytical person may call it accuracy, while others experience it as distrust. This is where maturity enters the conversation. Maturity is not abandoning your natural style. It is becoming responsible for the effect it has. You do not have to become softer than you are. You do not have to become louder than you are. You do not have to pretend to be someone else. But you do have to know when your normal way of speaking is making another person less honest, less open, less available. That awareness can save years of unnecessary friction. Think about how many relationships are not broken because people stop caring. They are damaged because people stop translating. One person says, "You never listen." The other says, "I'm listening right now." But listening is not only hearing the words, it is understanding the emotional shape behind them. One person says, "I just need more support." The other person immediately offers solutions. That support was not a request for strategy. It was a request to feel less alone. One person says, "Can we look at the details first?" The other hears criticism. But the details were not an attack. They were a way of building trust. One person says, "Let's not rush this." The other hears resistance, but the pause was not laziness.
It was an attempt to make the change feel survivable. When people are not translated accurately, they begin to live beside each other instead of with each other. Same house, same office, same table, different inner worlds. And the painful part is that many of these conflicts could have been softened by one small act of perception, not a perfect speech, not a psychological analysis, just the ability to pause and to ask internally, what is this person actually needing from me right now? Do they need brevity, warmth, reassurance, evidence, time, a decision, a little dignity? That question can change the next sentence, and sometimes the next sentence changes the whole direction of the conversation. Because people remember how they feel around you. They may forget the exact words, they may forget the order of the discussion, but they remember whether they had to brace themselves. They remember whether they felt rushed, dismissed, overwhelmed, corrected, or heard. And over time, that memory becomes your reputation in their nervous system. Before you even speak, their body has already made a prediction. With this person, I need to defend. With this person, I need to perform. With this person, I need to stay quiet. With this person, I can tell the truth. That last one is rare, and it is powerful. To become someone people can tell the truth around is not a small thing.
It means your presence does not punish honesty. It means your way of listening does not make people regret opening their mouth. It means you have learned to read more than words, have learned to read pressure, hesitation, tempo, resistance, enthusiasm, and silence. Not perfectly. No one does this perfectly. Well enough to notice when a conversation is asking for something deeper than a response. Sometimes it is asking for restraint, sometimes for clarity, sometimes for courage, sometimes for gentleness. And the person who can sense the difference becomes someone people trust in a way they may not even be able to explain. Before you can read other people clearly, you have to become honest about the lens you are reading them through. Because you are never just observing people. You are observing them through your own history, your own temperament, your own fears, your own unfinished lessons. This is why two people can watch the same conversation and walk away with completely different conclusions. One person says he was confident. Another says he was arrogant. One says she was careful. Another says she was difficult. One says he was warm. Another says he was wasting time. One says she was calm. Another says she was avoiding the truth. The behavior may be the same, but the interpretation is filtered through what each person values, fears, and expects. This is where reading people becomes more serious, because it is not enough to know their style. You have to know your own bias. If you are someone who values results, you may unconsciously respect people who move quickly and lose patience with people who need time. You may call your speed clarity. You may call their caution weakness. But sometimes what you call hesitation is actually responsibility, moving at a slower pace. If you are someone who values connection, you may trust people who are expressive and feel uneasy around people who are quiet, structured, or emotionally contained. You may assume silence means distance. Sometimes silence is not rejection. Sometimes it is processing. If you are someone who values peace, you may see direct disagreement as aggression, even when the other person is simply trying to be clear. You may confuse intensity with danger, but not every sharp edge is meant to cut you. If you are someone who values precision, you may become suspicious of people who speak broadly, move fast, or rely on instinct. You may hear confidence and think, where is the evidence? But sometimes a person is not careless. They are simply oriented toward movement before refinement. This is the hidden trap. We do not just communicate from our own pattern, we judge from it. We turn our preferences into standards. And once your preference becomes the standard, everyone different from you starts looking defective. The direct person thinks the careful person is slow. The careful person thinks the direct person is reckless. The warm person thinks the structured person is cold. The structured person thinks the warm person is unfocused. The peaceful person thinks the intense person is unsafe. The intense person thinks the peaceful person is avoiding reality. Both sides feel right. That is what makes this difficult. People are usually not trying to be unreasonable. They are trying to protect what they have learned of you. For one person, clarity is respect. For another, patience is respect. For another, enthusiasm is respect. For another, accuracy is respect. This is why the phrase "just be respectful" is not as simple as it sounds. Respect has different languages. One person, respect sounds like getting to the point. To another, it sounds like taking time to ask how they are. To another, it sounds like not forcing a decision too quickly. To another, it sounds like coming prepared with facts. When you do not understand this, you may sincerely believe you are being respectful while the other person feels unseen. That gap creates a lot of unnecessary pain, especially in the relationships that matter most. At work, it becomes friction. In marriage, it becomes distance. Friendship, it becomes silence. In leadership, it becomes mistrust. And inside yourself, it becomes confusion, because you keep thinking, I said the right thing and I spied it land wrong. Sometimes it landed wrong because the content was wrong. But many times, it landed wrong because the delivery did not honor the person's inner language. This does not mean you become a performer. It does not mean you become fake. It means you become precise with your presence. You stop assuming that authenticity means expressing yourself without adjustment. A child says whatever they feel in whatever form it comes out. A mature person learns that truth still needs a vessel. The same truth can be delivered like a hammer, a lamp, a map, or a locked file. The message matters, but the shape of the message determines whether the person can receive it. This is where your own identity begins to gauge. You stop being the person who says, "That's just how I am." That sentence is often where growth goes to die. Maybe that is how you are, but it is not all you are capable of becoming. A naturally direct person can learn warmth without losing strength. A naturally expressive person can learn structure without losing life. A naturally calm person can learn firmness without losing kindness. A naturally analytical person can learn ease without losing accuracy. The goal is not to erase your natural style. The goal is to become less trapped inside it. Because when you only have one way of communicating, you are dependent on the other person being able to receive that one way. But when you develop range, you become more free. You can speak briefly when someone needs clarity. You can slow down when someone needs safety. You can add energy when someone needs engagement. You can bring evidence when someone needs confidence. And none of that makes you less honest. It makes your honesty more skillful. The first sign that you are becoming better at reading people is not that you can identify everyone perfectly. It is that you become less obsessed with being right about them. You get more curious. You leave more room. You stop turning first impressions into final conclusions. You notice your own reaction and ask, am I seeing them clearly, or am I seeing them through the part of me that feels threatened by their style? That question alone can save a conversation, because sometimes the person in front of you is not the problem. Sometimes they are simply revealing the limits of your current range. And if you are willing to grow beyond those limits, communication becomes something deeper than talking. It becomes the practice of becoming large enough to meet different kinds of human beings without needing them to become copies of you. There is another mistake people make when trying to understand someone. They read the person, but they ignore the condition the person is in. That matters because people are not the same in every room. They are not the same at 8 in the morning after a night of broken sleep, under pressure, with unanswered messages waiting, with a headache building behind the eyes, with a family issue sitting quietly in the background. They are not the same when they feel respected as they are when they feel exposed. They are not the same when they have time to think as they are when a decision is demanded from them on the spot. A person's style is real, but their state changes how that style appears. The direct person under stress may become harsh. The expressive person under stress may become scattered. The peaceful person under stress may disappear into silence. The analytical person under stress may get trapped in overthinking. And if you only judge the surface behavior, you may misread a temporary state as a permanent character flaw. This is why context is part of reading people. Before you decide what someone is like, notice what situation they are inside. Are they rushed? Are they embarrassed? Are they trying not to disappoint someone? Are they performing in front of a group? Are they carrying responsibility they have not spoken about? Are they being asked to respond before they have a dime to rise themselves internally? Human beings do not communicate from pure reason. They communicate through a body that gets tired, a body that braces for conflict, a body that remembers previous conversations where honesty was punished, a body that sometimes hears a normal question as pressure because it has already been managing too much. This is not an excuse for poor behavior. It is a more accurate map. And accuracy matters if you want to know what to say, because the right words at the wrong moment often become the wrong words. You can offer a perfect explanation to a person who is too flooded to hear it. You can bring useful feedback to someone who is already ashamed, and they will experience it as one more weight. You can ask for clarity from someone whose mind is already overloaded, and they may give you irritation instead of information. Not because your request is unreasonable, because their system has no space left. You have probably seen this in yourself. There are days when a small comment feels much heavier than it should. A simple question sounds like criticism. A delay feels personal. A change in plans feels like too much. And after rest, food, silence, or distance, the same situation looks different. Nothing magical happened. Your capacity changed. And capacity changes perception. This is one of the quietest truths in communication. People do not only respond to what you say, they respond from the amount of capacity they have left. But when you are reading someone, ask yourself not only, what type of communicator is this? Ask, how much room does this person have right now? Some people have enough room for directness. Some need a softer entry. Some can handle complexity. Some need one clean sentence. Some are open to possibility. Some need certainty before they can even relax enough to explore. And sometimes the most intelligent thing you can say is not the most complete thing. It is the most receivable thing. That is a different skill. It means you stop confusing depth with length. You stop confusing honesty with intensity. You stop confusing urgency with importance. You learn to respect timing. A serious conversation held at the wrong moment can create more resistance than growth. Necessary truth delivered without regard for the person's state can become something they defend against instead of something they learn from. Mature communication does not only ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "Can this person receive this truth right now in this form from me?" That question requires restraint. Restraint is not weakness. Restraint is the ability to hold a message until it can do what it is meant to do. If someone is overwhelmed, begin with grounding, not a speech. Simple sentence. "Let's slow this down. If now is not the right moment, we can come back to it. I want to understand this properly, not rush through it." Those words do something before they communicate information. They reduce threat. And when threat goes down, intelligence comes back online. People become more flexible when they do not feel cornered. They become more honest when they do not feel punished. They become more reasonable when their body stops preparing for a fight. This is why tone, pacing, and setting matter. A direct message sent in a cold text may feel harsher than the same message spoken calmly face to face. A difficult question asked in public may feel humiliating, while the same question asked privately may feel respectful. A correction delivered quickly in front of others may trigger defensiveness, while a quiet conversation later may open the door. Again, it is not only the words. It is the environment around the words. If you want to read anyone well, pay attention to the room, the timing, the audience, the pressure, the fatigue, the stakes. A person's reaction is often a combination of who they are and what the moment is asking of them. When you understand that, you stop forcing communication through one narrow channel. You become more adaptive. Not fake. Adaptive. You realize that some conversations need a doorway, not a conclusion. Some people need space before they can be clear. Some need clarity before they can feel safe. Some need warmth before they can trust. Some need structure before they can comment. And sometimes, knowing exactly what to say means knowing what not to say yet. That is not silence from fear. That is silence with intelligence. Once you start noticing these things, the question becomes practical. What do you actually say? Because observation alone is not enough. You can understand that someone needs clarity and still bury your point under too much explanation. You can see that someone needs reassurance and still offer them a solution too quickly. You can sense that someone needs details and still speak in generalities because you are tired and you want the conversation to be over. This is where reading people becomes a discipline of language. Not fancy language, accurate language. The first thing to listen for is what the person is organizing around. Some people organize around the outcome. They want to know where this is going, what the decision is, what matters most, what needs to happen next. With this person, the kindest thing you can do is not always to soften everything. Sometimes the kindest thing is to be clean. Start with the point. The main issue is this. Here are the 3 things that matter. My recommendation is this, and here is why. I need a decision by Friday. That person is not looking for a long emotional runway. They are looking for traction. They relax when the conversation has a spine. If you speak to them in circles, they may start pushing. Not because they hate you, but because they are trying to create movement where they feel none. Other people organize around connection. Before they care about the decision, they want to feel the human temperature of the room. They listen for tone. They notice facial expression. They hear whether your words are carrying warmth or just instruction. With this person, do not rush so quickly into the point that you make the conversation feel sterile. Begin with a little humanity. I want to hear how you're seeing this. I appreciate the energy you brought to this. Let me think out loud with you for a moment. This could be interesting, but I want us to work it carefully. Mind often opens through engagement. They may need a sense of shared momentum before they settle into structure. When you speak to them with only cold efficiency, they may technically understand you, but something in them does not join you. Some people organize around steadiness. They are listening for whether this conversation is going to create unnecessary disruption. They may not resist directly. They may nod while privately becoming tense. They may need time to trust the change before they can support it honestly. This person, do not mistake gentleness for weakness. Speak with calm direction. I know this is a shift, so we do not need to force everything at once. Here is what will stay the same, and here is what will change. I want your honest concerns before we move forward. We can take this step by step. Notice the difference. You are not asking permission from their fear. You are giving their nervous system enough stability to participate. That matters, because some people do not become difficult when they are rushed. They become quiet, and quiet resistance can last much longer than open disagreements. And there are people who organize around evidence. They do not trust enthusiasm by itself. They do not relax because someone sounds confident. They want to understand the reasoning. They want to see the process. They want to know what has been considered and what has not. With this person, do not say, "Just trust me," unless you want to lose credibility. Say, "Here is the data I'm using. Here's the assumption behind this decision. Here is the risk I see, and here is how I would reduce it. Take a look at this and tell me what I may be missing." That last sentence is powerful with analytical people because it respects their need to examine. It turns their scrutiny into contribution instead of conflict. Now, this does not mean every person fits neatly into one category forever. People are more complex than that. A person can want results at work and reassurance at home. They can be precise when money is involved and expressive when discussing an idea they love. They can be calm in public and deeply reactive in private. So the goal is not to memorize people like files in a cabinet. The goal is to listen for the dominant need in the moment. Outcome. Connection. Steadiness. Evidence. Those 4 words can save you from a lot of unnecessary confusion. Before you speak, ask yourself, which of these is the person asking for right now? If they are asking for outcome, give them structure and direction. If they are asking for connection, give them warmth and participation. If they are asking for steadiness, give them calm and pacing. If they are asking for evidence, give them logic and transparency. This is how you begin to know what to say. Not because you have a perfect script, but because you understand the function your words need to serve. A sentence is not just a sentence. It can be a bridge. It can be a shield. It can be a map. It can be a hand on the shoulder. The same words spoken without awareness can close someone down, but the right words in the right shape can make a person feel like you are finally speaking to the part of them that has been trying to be understood. And that feeling is rare. So rare that when someone experiences it, they often lean in without even realizing it. They become less defensive. They explain more honestly. They give you better information. They stop performing and start participating. This is why skilled communication feels calm from the outside but precise on the inside. You are not throwing words into the air hoping they land. You are choosing them with respect for the person receiving them. There is one more layer that separates a perceptive communicator from someone who merely sounds perceptive. Perceptive person does not need to be certain too quickly. That may seem small, but it is not. A lot of people try to read others as if they are solving a puzzle. They watch a few behaviors, decide what someone is, and then start treating that interpretation like a fact. But human beings are not puzzles. They are living systems. They shift depending on trust, fatigue, pressure, environment, history, and the meaning they attach to the moment. So if you want to read someone well, do not turn your first impression into a prison. Treat it like a hypothesis. Quietly, internally. You might think, this person seems to need clarity. But instead of assuming, you test it with language. Would it help if I gave you the short version first? You might sense that someone feels rushed. So you say, "We do not have to solve the whole thing in this minute. Let's just find the next honest step." You might notice that someone is asking detailed questions, not to attack you, but to feel grounded. So you say, "I can walk you through the reasoning, then you can tell me where it feels weak." You are not announcing, "I have figured you out." That would feel invasive. You are simply adjusting and watching what opens. This is one of the most useful principles in communication. Do not label people out loud. Respond to the needs you think may be present, and let their reaction teach you whether you wear a close. If they relax, you are closer. If they become more guarded, you may have missed something. If they correct you, listen carefully because correction is information. This is how trust grows in real conversations. Not through perfect understanding on the first atom, through accurate repair. A person does not need you to read them flawlessly. They need to feel that when you miss them, you are willing to adjust. That is rare. Many people double down when they misread someone. They say, "No, that's not what I meant," with irritation. They defend the purity of their intention. They explain harder. They try to win the interpretation. But mature communication has a different posture. It can say, I may have read that wrong. Let me try again. I can see how that sounded different from what I intended. That's useful to know. I was assuming something else. These sentences are simple, but they carry a kind of strength that people trust because they show that your ego is not more important than the content. And this matters deeply, especially with people who have learned over time that opening up comes with a cost. Some people have been punished for being arrogant. Some have been mocked for being sensitive. Some have been ignored when they were careful. Some have been told they were difficult when one was misled in more clarity. But when you communicate with them, you are not only speaking to the present conversation. You may be touching old expectations. They may expect to be rushed. They may expect to be dismissed. They may expect to be misunderstood. They may expect you to use their honesty against them. This is why one good sentence can change the atmosphere. A sentence like, take your time. I actually want the real answer. Or, I'm not asking so I can argue. I'm asking because I want to understand. Or, you do not have to make this sound polished. Those words create permission. And permission often reveals more than pressure ever could. If you want people to tell you the truth, you have to become someone who does not punish the first draft of their honesty. Most real thoughts come out messy at first. People contradict themselves. They pause. They say one thing, then realize it is not exactly what they meant. They test the room before they reveal the deeper sentence. If you jump too soon, correct too fast, or make their uncertainty feel foolish, they will retreat into a safer version of themselves, and then you will not be reading them anymore. You will be reading their defense. There is a difference. The real person usually appears after enough safety has been built for the performance to lower. This does not mean you become endlessly soft or passive. Sometimes the most respectful thing is still to be direct. But even directness can have dignity. You can say, I need a clear answer. Without saying, why are you always so vague? You can say, I disagree with that conclusion. Without saying, that makes no sense. You can say, this detail matters, without making someone feel stupid for missing it. There is a way to be honest that leaves the entire person intact, and that is the kind of honesty people eventually trust. Deeper skill is learning to communicate in a way that makes truth more possible. Not just your truth. There's two. Because if your presence only allows people to agree, perform, or defend, then you are not actually getting good information. You are getting survival behavior. When people feel they can be clear without being punished, uncertain without being mocked, emotional without being dismissed, and careful without being rushed, they give you something better than politeness. They give you reality. And reality is what makes good communication possible. This is why reading people is not about control. It is about calibration. You observe. You speak. You notice the response. You adjust. You leave room. You repair. You keep the conversation alive. Over time, this creates a quiet kind of authority. Not the authority of being the loudest person in the room. Not the authority of always having the answer. The authority of being steady enough that others can become more honest around you. When people become more honest around you, you begin to know what to say. Not because you are guessing better. Because they are finally giving you something real to respond to. If you are still here with me this far into the video, let me say something simple. Subscribe to the channel and stay close. Because if this kind of conversation matters to you, you are probably not looking for tricks. You are looking for language for things you have been sensing for a long time. Tension in certain rooms. A weight behind certain silences. The reason some conversations leave you tired, even when nobody raised their voice. Now we have to talk about something more uncomfortable. Reading people will not help you if you use it to avoid being honest with yourself, because once you begin to understand communication patterns, there is a temptation to stand above people. Think, I know what they are doing. I know their type. I know why they reacted that way. And sometimes you might be close. But if insight turns into superiority, you have already lost the point. Goal is not to become the person silently diagnosing everyone in the room. Goal is to become more responsible for what happens between you and another human being. That includes their patterns, but it also includes yours. Because the moment you feel misunderstood, something in you has a pattern too. Maybe you get sharper. Maybe you over-explain. Maybe you withdraw and call it peace. Maybe you start gathering evidence in your mind to prove that you were right. Maybe you become charming, agreeable, controlled, distant, cold, funny, intellectual, or silent. Not because you planned it, because your own system is trying to protect you. And this is the final turn. You cannot read someone clearly while you are secretly fighting for your own emotional survival. When your ego feels threatened, perception gets distorted. You stop listening. You start collecting proof. You search for confirmation that the other person is selfish, careless, dramatic, controlling, weak, cold, or unreasonable. At that point, you are no longer reading them. You are building a case, and many conversations become courtrooms without anyone noticing. One person presents evidence. The other defends. Examples are brought forward. Tone becomes testimony. Silence becomes guilt. A delayed response becomes proof. A small phrase becomes the entire trial. And underneath all of it is usually something very human. I do not want to be dismissed. I do not want to be controlled. I do not want to be blamed. I do not want to feel foolish. I do not want to be invisible again. But before you try to know exactly what to say to someone else, you have to ask a quieter question. What am I trying to protect in myself right now? That question can change the conversation before you speak another word, because if you are trying to protect your pride, your words will have a certain edge. If you are trying to protect your image, your words will become polished but not honest. If you are trying to protect your comfort, your words may avoid the very thing that needs to be said. If you are trying to protect yourself from rejection, you may speak in a way that tests the other person instead of trusting them with the truth. And people feel this. They may not name it, but they feel when your words are carrying a hidden demand. Agree with me. Reassure me. Admire me. Do not question me. Do not leave. Do not make me feel what I am trying not to feel. This is why the best communicators are not just skilled with people. They are skilled with themselves. They can feel the impulse to react and not obey it immediately. They can notice the heat rising in their chest. They can sense the sentence they want to say because it would feel good for 3 seconds and damage the next 3 days. They can pause long enough to choose something cleaner, not weaker, cleaner. A clean sentence does not punish the other person for your discomfort. It tells the truth without making the truth carry revenge. It might sound like, I think I'm reacting faster than I want to. Let me slow down. Or, I want to answer that honestly, but I need a viscount. Or, I can hear your point. I also need to tell you how this landed for me. These are not dramatic lines. They are adult lines. They keep the conversation from becoming a battlefield. And here is something people do not say enough. Sometimes, knowing exactly what to say means accepting that the other person may still not receive it. You can be thoughtful. You can be precise. You can be calm. You can choose the right timing, the right tune, the right words. Still, someone may not be ready. That does not mean the effort was wasted. It means communication has limits. You are responsible for your clarity, not for controlling another person's openness. That distinction brings peace. Because without it, you will spend your life trying to unlock people who are not willing to open. You will keep adjusting, explaining, softening, sharpening, proving, waiting, hoping that if you finally find the perfect sentence, they will become available. But some people are not unreachable because you lack skill. Some people are unreachable because they are committed to their defense. Mature communication knows when to adapt and when to stop negotiating with a closed door. That is not bitterness. That is discernment. The point is not to win every person. The point is to become the kind of person who can enter a conversation with awareness, speak with respect, listen beneath the surface, and leave without betraying yourself. That is the balance. Read them clearly. Do not abandon yourself to be understood. In the end, reading people is not about becoming clever. It is not about walking into a room and secretly sorting everyone into categories. It is not about having the perfect sentence ready for every situation. It is much quieter than that. It is the ability to notice To notice when someone's directness is not cruelty but urgency. To notice when someone's laughter is not shallowness but a doorway into trust. To notice when someone's silence is not agreement but caution. To notice when someone's questions are not resistance but an attempt to feel safe with the facts. And then, after noticing, to choose your words with care. That is the part people underestimate. Words are not only information, they carry weight. It can make someone open or make someone brace. It can invite honesty or train someone to hide. It can create movement, calm, trust, or distance. And once you understand that, you become less careless with what you say. Not afraid, not stiff, just more awake. You begin to understand that every conversation has two layers. There is the topic being discussed, and then there is the human being underneath that peak. The mistake is thinking the topic is the whole conversation, the deadline, the decision, the disagreement, the plan, the money. The mistake, the next step. Those things matter, but underneath them, there is always another question being asked quietly. Do you respect me? Can I trust you? Am I safe to be honest here? Are you actually listening or just waiting to correct me? Do I have to defend myself or can we think together? When you can hear that hidden question, you start speaking differently. You stop needing to dominate every room. You stop needing to fill every silence. You stop treating every hesitation as weakness. You stop treating every objection as an attack. You stop treating every difference as disrespect. And slowly, you become easier to trust. Not because you agree with everyone, but because people can feel that you are not trying to erase them in order to be heard. That is rare. There is a kind of presence that makes people smaller. They edit themselves around it. They become careful, tense, polite, less alive. And there is a kind of presence that gives people room. They think more clearly around it. They tell the truth more easily. They feel corrected without feeling humiliated. They feel challenged without feeling crushed. They feel seen without feeling exposed. That is the kind of communicator worth becoming. Not perfect, not always calm, not never wrong, but willing to repair, willing to pause, willing to ask a better question, willing to see the person behind the pattern, because knowing what to say is not only about choosing the right sentence. Sometimes it is about choosing the right speed, the right amount of silence, the right level of detail, the right tone, the right moment. Sometimes it is saying, here is the point. Sometimes it is saying, take your time. Sometimes it is saying, show me how you got there. Sometimes it is saying, I can see why this matters to you. And sometimes it is saying nothing yet because the conversation is not ready for more words. That restraint is part of wisdom, so the next time you are speaking with someone and something feels difficult, pause for 1 second before reacting. Ask yourself, what is this person asking for beneath the words? Are they asking for clarity, connection, deadness, evidence, respect, face? And then ask one more question. What am I trying to protect in myself right now? Those two questions can change the entire direction of a conversation. Not every time, not with every person, but enough to matter, enough to keep you from turning people into unloose too quickly, enough to keep you from losing relationships to misunderstandings that could have been softened, enough to help you speak in a way that does not betray the truth, but also does not wound unnecessarily. That is the real skill. Be clear without being cruel, firm without being weak, careful without being afraid, direct without being careless, and human without losing your center. If this video gave you language for something you have lived but never fully named, subscribe to the channel and stay close. Share this with 5 people who could use it, not because they need to be fixed, but because better conversations change the rooms we live in. Leave a sincere comment below and tell me which communication pattern you recognized most in yourself. And if there is a topic you want me to explore next, write it in the comments. Because sometimes one honest conversation does not just change what is said,